Senator Chris Coons of Delaware, who is a member of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. Senator, very grateful to have you here on the show. Thank you very much for coming on. I want to start with...
Thanks, Kasie.
Of course, with these Patriot missiles, because that's part of this deal that the president has announced. You have obviously been a vocal supporter of Ukraine in this conflict with Russia. Do you think President Trump deserves credit for doing this? It's been at the top of the Ukrainian wish list for quite some time.
Absolutely. Look, I am hopeful that President Trump is finally getting clarity that it is Putin who is the major barrier to peace, not Zelensky. I'll remind you, Trump campaigned promising he would end the war in Ukraine on day one. And here we are 6 months, almost 7 months into his presidency. And frankly, he's been on again, off again on whether he will continue to support Ukraine. We just had a freeze in recent weeks on sending additional weapons that were approved and funded under the previous administration. So I'm relieved if, in fact, President Trump is now going to support selling weapons to the Europeans who are going to invest the money to then transfer them to Ukraine. Night after night after night, Putin and the Russian military are pounding civilian targets deep inside Ukraine. So this couldn't come any sooner, and it's desperately needed. And I'm hopeful that the bipartisan bill in the Senate that I co-sponsor, along with more than 80 others, that would threaten additional sanctions on the countries who are fueling Russia's war machine by buying its cheap oil, will also move ahead in the weeks coming.
Well, so speaking of that, Senator, and I want to be clear, this is reporting that's coming in from Politico, although it's reporters on Capitol Hill, so I'm sure Manu Raja was in the scrum somewhere. But apparently the majority leader, John Thune, said that he's going to hold off on advancing that sanctions bill for now. He says it sounds like the president is going to attempt to do some of this on his own, and he seems to want to give some space for that. He says if at some point the president concludes it makes sense, he needs it in the negotiation to move the bill, we'll do it, we'll be ready to go. Do you think this is the right move?
Well, Kasie, look, there's very few things in the Senate today that get more than 50 or 60 votes. There are 84 co-sponsors of this bill. A reminder that support for Ukraine in their ongoing war against Russia's aggression is broadly bipartisan. So I hope that Leader Thune will reconsider and put the bill on the floor, give us a chance to show that we support Ukraine, and give President Trump another tool that he can use to threaten President Putin. We've seen a tragic pattern here where Trump shows some resolve, says he's going to toughen up and strongly support Ukraine, and then he has a call with Putin and he backs down. I think it's important for all of us in Congress to show that we continue to support Ukraine.
Fair enough. Sir, I want to change gears because there also was some additional breaking news from the Supreme Court this afternoon that I wanted to get your reaction to. The court said this afternoon that President Trump can proceed with plans for mass layoffs at the Department of Education. What's your reaction to that?
Look, just last week, there were 1,300 laid off from our State Department, both Foreign Service officers and civil service officers, folks who have dedicated their careers and their lives to serving in dangerous places, to protecting the American people and projecting our national interest. This further action by the Supreme Court clearing the way for President Trump to go ahead and slash the Department of Education is a disheartening, disappointing ruling. There are millions of Americans with disabled children who count on the federal Department of Education to be the guarantor of civil rights. There are tens of millions of Americans whose student loans are managed by the Department of Education. And in my home state of Delaware, like so many others, it is federal Department of Education funds that help with quality education where there are racial disparities. So this is not an encouraging development.
Sir, finally, President Biden gave an interview to the New York Times where he defended his use of the autopen. Do you think it's productive for him to be talking about that at this stage?
Look, I missed the story today, but my folks just updated me on it. Apparently, there were Republicans suggesting that somehow President Biden didn't make the decisions didn't sign off on all the different pardons that happened at the end of his administration. I think squabbling over whether he personally signed every single one or knowingly approved every single one isn't particularly constructive. He clearly made those decisions. I would have to ask whether President Trump signed every one of the hundreds and hundreds of pardons that he issued for folks who used violence against police officers in the Capitol on January 6th.
All right, Senator Chris Coons, thanks very much for the time today, sir. I really appreciate it.